I would start if you're happy, Ian.
Right. Okay. Just start. Yeah. Okay. Just get the slideshow running. So I'm just going to. So this is the first of two sessions actually today. As a reminder, we are going to record this session just to make you aware, so that we've got a record of it, and obviously we can capture everything. We have got a session later on this afternoon, but this morning's session is tended to focus on the community aspect of the community in place theme. So it's myself today, Ian Timms, and Elliot Dommett working on behalf of Stantec, producing the plan for County Council. We've got Anne-Marie as keeping us in line and helping us out in the background. Anne-Marie Spalding, many of you will know. So today we're just going to, I've got a very short, well, there's a few slides here, but I'm going to hopefully get through it in less than 10 minutes so that we can get onto the discussion, which is the important part of the session. So we've got around about an hour to do that. So we're going to give you an overview, very brief overview of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, talk about the community in place theme, give you an overview of existing Somerset strategy themes. So that's some work that we've been doing to support the production of the investment plan, and then get into the discussion. So this is the national context. I'm not going to go through it actually. Hopefully many of you saw this a couple of weeks ago when we presented. Yeah, there's obviously money there. There's government, number of government priorities, and then the local investment plan goes onto three themes. So the Somerset position is on the screen. So we've got an allocation of 7,263,760, and Somerset County Council will be producing the plan, which you're aware of. So the Somerset allocation is there in the table. We've recalculated based on figures we received last night, and that to show the splits, but those may change in award. But as you can see, they're largely revenue-based funding, and these splits are based on the national percentages of the government is suggesting should be spent over these 3 years. But it will be there or thereabouts. So first year, obviously less, and then it increases over the following 2 years of the plan to come to the total. So communities in place theme. So it's intended to enable the places to invest, restore community spaces and relationships, create foundations for economic development. And so the intention is to strengthen the fabric of communities, supporting building price in place. So it's all the things that your organisations will be doing already. And I'm sure it will fit very well with any activities that you're carrying out going forwards. So it's broken down into these two objectives, which put some more detail into those areas that I've just gone through as an overview. The first is about social fabric, local pride and belonging. So we've kind of highlighted those, and there's a range of things there that could be invested in. And then the second objective is around building resilient, healthy and safe neighbourhoods. So again, an area, so there's a lot of words there, but they are all areas that you'll already be working in. So within the Shared Prosperity Fund prospectus, there are 15 interventions areas that government are suggesting might be areas that the plan in your local area would tackle. So just running quickly through, these are the first 5. The first one's around town centres. The second is around improvements to community neighbourhood infrastructure. The third's around local green spaces, community gardens, and so on. Fourth is around enhancing support for cultural historic heritage institutions. And then the fifth is around design and management, around designing out crime, so sort of antisocial behaviour interventions. 6 to 10 then, support for local arts, culture and heritage, supports for active travel enhancements, funding for development of these wider campaigns. Impactful volunteering is 9, 10 is around sports facilities and activities relating to that. And then we've got interventions 11 to 15. So we've got investment in capacity building for civil society and groups. And then we've got this investment in community engagement, community measures around cost of living, which I'm sure will be a hot topic over the next couple of years, and then funding to support relevant feasibility studies, which of course always needed, and then investment in digital infrastructure. So those are the kind of 15 intervention areas that government may expect to see within the community in place theme of our plan. So these next two slides are an overview of existing Somerset strategies. So these are objectives that have already been adopted by Somerset strategies that match to the Levelling Up Fund objectives and to the possible interventions that might appear in the plan. So as you can see, these match quite closely to the interventions that are in the Shared Prosperity Fund prospectus. So the first is around town centres, and this is appearing in a number of strategies across Somerset. The second is around enhancing the public realm, which again is appearing in a number of strategies. All of these do. Sport flexibility of the high street, social cohesiveness, you'd expect to see that appearing, I'm sure. Coastal change, obviously specific to those areas of Somerset. So those are the first five. And then the second five that are common and across the piece in a number of strategies, we've got this green infrastructure, so increasing and connecting those, improving health and well-being, with active travel networks and safer communities, improving access to services, and this is around rural and coastal communities, and then improving housing opportunities. So these are the objectives from adopted strategies that most closely match to where we are now. So I now do want to get on to the discussion with yourself, so I'll let you talk. And hopefully we'll have a good discussion around these three questions. So what we're looking for today really is to understand what your preferred investment areas would be for the community in place theme. So really, are there any particular areas which you feel are fundamental to support? Thinking about what I've just gone through in summary. Are there any areas where you've experienced success and therefore you would like to continue or grow that further? And then thirdly, are there any areas where you feel there's a limited need for support within Somerset or of less relevance to Somerset? I'm just going to stop sharing that now if I can. And yeah, I'll just we could kick off the discussion. I can't see anyone at the moment, so Elliot, is there anyone in the chat or got their hands up who'd like to start?
Yes, we've just had a hand go up. Charlotte Jones.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Ian. Hello. Hi, thank you. So in terms of the interventions, there didn't seem to be a mention of mental health, and my understanding is Somerset is a bit of an outlier in terms of suicide, for example. And so perhaps there should be something strong there, particularly large rural county, COVID, people's mental health. Lots of work going on in lots of parts of the county, but I think it's should definitely be recognised. There's no mention of the voluntary and community sector as such in terms of building capacity. There's mention to new social networks, which is a slightly ambiguous language. Collaboratively with the likes of, participation with Community Council, Community Foundation, lots of voluntary sector organisations. Spark with the County Council supported a research project, which begins with R&R, Reflect, Renew, Recover, I believe. And in there was some sort of needs and understanding of voluntary sector capacity, which sort of underpins a lot of what Somerset is about. My other point was going to be that I understood the session's purpose was to explain the approach that we're going to be taking. I know that the submission of the plan needs to be done by the 1st of August. And at some point, we'd just like to talk about how will the wider community engagement and wider community sector. I can see there's a few people from the voluntary sector here, but Somerset is made up of masses of small scale neighbourhood level. So it'd be good to have a bit of space to just talk a bit about that, if that's possible, Ian.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thanks for that point. That's the first around mental health and so on. That's really helpful, I think. And I think obviously because it's a government kind of document or starter for town, it's mentioned very broadly. But I think that's obviously something we need to pick up Somerset. In terms of the engagement, we have got other opportunities for engagement. So there's a questionnaire which is going to be popped up later on and put onto the microsite, the Somerset County Council microsite. And we've got another session later on today as well, and we're obviously planning to keep engaged with people and just keep collecting views. So there is some potential for some one-to-one sessions as well, which is being managed by Anne-Marie. So I think we'll kind of have a chat afterwards and see what we can do. But obviously a very short timescale really to produce a plan. So it's going to be, so it's challenging to get everyone's views in over a short period of time. Who's next?
So Nathaniel Lucas next.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so I didn't catch the last lady's name, but I would support around kind of health and well-being. I think that's a really critical thing, and also areas of health and social care as well. So I don't know whether people will be aware, but one of the projects which is kind of was forming part of a Levelling Up Fund submission is around the creation of a health and social care centre of excellence, which will mitigate against certainly the impact of COVID and being able to deliver a stronger sector which is widely under-resourced. I think it also goes to the other point that was raised a minute ago as well, in the sense of that a large majority of the health and social care sector is actually delivered by SMEs and micro organisations as well, and actually being able to kind of put that support in place through a centre like that, I think it would be really useful. So for me, health and well-being is a massive part of it, and if I think from my understanding, the ability to be able to link different government funds together is a key part of that as well. So if you're joining LUF with SPF as well, then that feels like something that's really positive. For probably, I mean, I would suggest probably sort of year 2, 3 in terms of that revenue spend.
Okay. Anyone got any thoughts on that? Or actually, I'm sorry, I should have invited Charlotte back as well to any other thoughts on what Charlotte had to say as well to start with.
We've got Jane Birch next.
Okay.
Hand up.
Okay. So Jane then. Okay. Hi, Jane.
Sorry, I thought I pressed the unmute, but clearly not. Just really echoing what Charlotte said, really around health and well-being. I think it's a really, really, really important theme about being a resilient business. The work that I've seen going on within CCS and the County Council around micro providers, that's a really flexible way to provide that health and well-being support to people particularly in rural areas. So I think that's something that we're doing that would be good to see. That CCS is doing and also the county are doing, that would be good to see continued and extended to that flexible approach. Seems to work really well. And then also on the resilient communities, we've seen, we're working on a CRF project with Spark and SCF and SSE around social enterprise support, and you can see tangible changes in those enterprises when they're given one-to-one support and a network with others. It's amazing to see the difference it's making to people. So, and that would apply to any business, I know, but it's something I think we need to make sure is in there, that direct support's available so people can get specific tailored support to what they need as an enterprise, and that applies, helps them to build, whether that's a community organisation or a social enterprise, helps them to be more skilled and more resilient for the future. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, as because we've seen how CRF has worked, but I'm not quite sure if this works in the same way, that we put in projects that are then considered, or it's more broader county things. But I'm sure you'll tell us. But yeah,
I think we're working at the moment on trying to set out or gather together the investment priorities, and in parallel with that, we've started discussing how there might be a call for projects and how that might work. So I think we've got to describe that in the investment plan, which will then go to government, but the investment then is approved or should be approved around about October. So that gives us some time to kind of work through what the actual mechanisms to distribute the funding is. And obviously we will be looking to do that with everyone here. So kind of develop that mechanism and understand how it will work. And the government suggesting usual mix of grants, commissioning, direct engagement with services, or any other mechanism the local authority can come up with to distribute the cash, which is measured in a robust way. So that's sort of broadly how the funding distribution will work. But yeah, it's a kind of work in progress, but obviously be modelled on funds that have already been delivered. And the understanding, and there's some tried and tested methods for doing that. So we will see. It's a bit of a waffle there. So we'll next person, please.
I will just add as well that one-to-one business support for social enterprises that will fit better within the supporting local businesses team. There is provision within that, and the prospectus does set out some example interventions, which include support for social enterprises and community enterprises. So that session is tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, so it would, right. I meant to say that. So we've got these two others. There's two other themes as well. So it'd be a case of trying to fit projects across those. So that's
exactly. So there's a way to reach community enterprises through all three themes, through skills, through supporting local businesses, and through the communities that they affect. So okay. Julie Reader-Sullivan next.
Yes, thank you. And it's a little bit of a supporting what others have said, because of course you put your hand up and then other people say what you're going to say. I think the health and wellbeing theme, yes, we're within not within LUF, but within the Glastonbury Town Deal, we have a health and wellbeing hub which is going through, and we've done some pilots that's proving really, really successful. And I think that does engage the community element, but the plea there is that of course it's collaborative, because we know that there are a lot of organisations doing very similar things, so it's how we network that together. So definitely needs to be incorporated, and of course that links across the employment and skills theme as well, because it's about providing one-stop shop themes. I think one of the other things that I would make a plea for in whatever we do is that, and forgive me, I know you'll all shout, that we don't do the low-hanging fruit. So we make sure that the outputs are delivered across the county. There's always a temptation, and that's not me speaking because I'm Mendip District Council. That's me speaking generally. We've all seen it in previous schemes that, it's a lot easier to deliver 20 outputs in a town than it is to deliver 20 outputs in a rural area, but that shouldn't be a reason for not doing that, and not making sure that all those community elements are across Somerset. I think, yes, the links with all the other funding streams so that we get the maximum out. So the town deals, LUF, all the other things, CRF. And what else did I have down relevant to this? I think that's probably it, other than supporting what everybody else. There are other notes, but I think that's where the links are between the other workshops. So, for example, with employability and skills, there are parts of Mendip where there aren't, for example, there isn't an employment and skills hub. But that then could be community as well. So I'll be quiet. That's my reflections for now.
Yeah, thank you. Got quite a few people waiting to speak now.
Yes, so. Let's go to Justin Sargent next.
Great, thank you very much. Morning, everybody. I'm sorry I missed some of the introduction, but forgive me if I am repeating. I'd agree with a lot of what I've heard already. If I understand correctly, the question is, what are the most pressing needs that we should be seeking to address? When absolutely. I think of levelling up in Somerset, I certainly agree with the rural gap, and that we must take account of that properly in a way that I think levelling up hasn't generally. But when I think of levelling up in Somerset, the enormous gap in educational attainment
between kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and other pupils is the biggest levelling up and most persistent challenge that we have. And I couldn't see in the initial slides when it ran through the different priorities within the funding and identify for Somerset whether that sort of fell into those.
It appears in the, I think it's probably appearing in the skills theme more prominently, and there's, you know, that links into the Multiply fund as well, which is obviously another fund that's available at the moment and needs a plan. So yeah, it is there. It's maybe just not being picked out today in this particular.
Whether you can even touch the size of a challenge like that with only 7 million over 3 years, I don't know, but it's the thing that leaps out to me when we talk about levelling up, because as you would all know, not just in Somerset but down in Devon and Cornwall as well, the attainment gap is much wider than we see in many cities, many inner city areas. There's strong evidence that there's an element of rural factors that don't get picked up in traditional measures of poverty and disadvantage, and it's our biggest challenge as a community. I suppose on the back of that, given that that is not just a Somerset problem but a regional, a sort of Southwest Peninsula thing, how do connections, if any, get made between what we do here and what we do across a region? That was meant to be a question.
Would you like me to step in there, Ian?
Oh yeah, go on. Go for it, Marie. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously within this short time scale, we're pushed to make connections with other areas, but through the Heart of the Southwest Local Enterprise Partnership, we are working certainly with Devon, and through the Greater Southwest Partnership, we're working with Dorset and Cornwall as well. Those issues like that need to be picked up. I think some of it will be picked up through national programs like Multiply. And I think what we're seeing, and I could be wrong, but with this UK Shared Prosperity Fund, is a community-led local development. So the bottom-up approach. And so that's why we're here to try and gather, excuse me, everyone's thoughts. Just whilst I'm speaking, I will say that the CRF was supposed to be a precursor to this fund. So I would imagine that we'll be following similar principles. This first year around place, we will have to hit the ground running because we'll have from September to March to deliver that first year's priorities. So probably building on what's gone before, just for this first year, and then enabling us to move forward for the years 2 and 3, with the focus being on business in year 2 and skills in year 3. So that's sort of how the government set it out for us, and it's probably not ideal, but something we have to work with.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Who's next?
So we've got Dirk Rowetter next.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So Dirk Rowetter, School for Social Entrepreneurs, again, supporting a lot what other people have said. Just to kind of comment on where the kind of support for voluntary community social enterprise sector sits. You're absolutely right. You know, it is in supporting local businesses, but it's also in supporting local communities. You know, the way we see that sector, it spans both areas, and I think that's important. And from that perspective, if I think about communities, I think there's a need to support communities to handle more of the assets that are in their communities. So the kind of, you know, how do we do asset transfer successfully so the community is not just left with liabilities, but also with the ability to handle assets. How can communities take more ownership of their natural environment as well as their built environment? So I think, you know, there's things that could be built into the Shared Prosperity Fund, if it's particularly talking about a three-year timescale for this, or what's effectively probably 2 years really in the end. And the other thing is something around, you know, looking at how councils and communities can work together better. So I mean, that's something we've been doing in Devon through the Community Renewal Fund, looking at supply chains, looking at procurement, and looking at the Social Value Act and communities' right to buy, right to build. There are lots of things that are sort of being worked on at high level, but I think there's still a gap in how we actually work that into a local area so that it becomes effective and makes a change.
That's great, thank you. I think that is one of the themes of the local government reorganisation, actually, in Somerset. So that kind of fits pretty well with that theme around local community networks and local community empowerment. So running in parallel. But I won't say anything else about that at this stage. But it's not my bag. But okay, who is next?
Move to Rob Semple next, please.
Yeah.
And sorry for being late, so I might be off the mark and somewhat to say, but supporting a lot of what's been said, but also linking in actually with what Dirk's just been saying. I think one of the things we do, the Together teams or one team working in our communities, and one of the things I think we're noticing is that lack of kind of youth service or a support for youth service to provide, and that's starting to have a real impact now in terms of antisocial behaviour, county lines, drugs, and all of that type of thing. And knowing that the youth provision isn't really out there at the moment, it's maybe building on that part of looking at how do we support communities to start supporting their young people and make that sustainable, utilising assets that are sat there potentially empty or underutilised, and trying to build on that going forward as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I think it's a problem at the moment, but I can only see it getting worse because this the young generation at the moment, what we're seeing, it's really young, it's 13, 14-year-olds that are out causing quite high level antisocial behaviour offences, which if we don't start to look at that now, then they're going to be the adults in controlling these communities in the future.
Okay, that's all really good points. Thanks, Rob. Who else?
Thank you, Rob. Should we go to Deborah Scarrett next, please?
Hi, I'm here representing Abbury, and we very much invest in our communities. Our strapline is thriving communities, and you were talking about areas fundamental to support, and Dirk and Rob, the last two people that have come in, really preempted a lot of what we were going to say. First of all, investing in our young people, what we're finding in our communities, the antisocial behaviour, but the green spaces, and actually again putting it back into the community. What do they need? We fully understand the mental health, all of those issues, and health and well-being, and we've got the voluntary sector that deliver a fantastic service, and we grant fund people, but I think it's finding out what our communities need, investing in our young people, because that levelling up, I think there is a real concern that we keep going as we are and we miss a trick with our future community people, and keeping it local. Somerset's big, we've got lots of different issues in different areas, and that's one of the things that we do with our local investment, our community investment plans. We look at that specific area and then try and do what is needed in that area, and I think hopefully this is something that could be done through this UK Share Prosperity Fund, and then that collaboration is just reiterating everything that people are saying, and the skills and our employment bit all follows. But I think we've got to get people investing in their communities again, get that community spirit, which we did get during COVID, the pandemic, but I think we're slowly creeping out of that. And for me, for them to thrive is what we need to invest in.
There's a platform there to work with, I suppose, but yeah, needs some further investment. Okay, that's a really useful point. Thank you. Who is?
So we'll go to Matthew Byrne next, please.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, at the risk of kind of basically sounding like a broken record, because I think Dirk, Rob, and Deborah have all pretty much covered some of what I was going to say. I think we need to balance and understand that need to be ready to go and to sort of build on what's already there, but communities will need support to respond to this across the whole 3 years, and especially those that are in most need of levelling up, as they're often the ones that have the least existing capacity on the ground to respond in terms of community organisation and social capital. So we really must recognise the need for early investment in community development if we possibly can. It's I think fundamental, and we saw that in the pandemic, and we want to sort of maintain and build on what was done there.
So, I mean, well, for the last 15 minutes, we've obviously had that really clear theme appearing. So obviously that's something that all of you today in the workshop, or the people who've spoken so far, that's giving a really clear steer on one of the priorities that's needed. So that kind of capacity building early on in the plan. So with the community. So that's really helpful. We got anyone else waiting to speak?
We do, Nathaniel Lucas.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just to kind of go on from some of the points that have been raised by Justin and Rob and others around kind of levelling up and social deprivation and also supporting young people. And I guess this is probably a bit of I think it does fit within this kind of theme, but I think it crosses over into kind of the employment and skills element as well. But for me, it's about being able to support the young people and giving them the opportunities to be able to actually get into work as well. It's targeting areas of social deprivation where they are, furthest from kind of being economically active and actually kind of breaking the cycle. Because, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but there are kind of generational issues around kind of being economically active. So being able to give young people the opportunity to be able to get back into work, or actually the skills, but even actually the kind of entrepreneurial spirit, being able to develop their own businesses as well. I think that's really key and something that's really important as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So we don't have any more hands up now. I'll just check the chat box.
Okay. Charlotte's hand is
okay. Yeah, Charlotte, please.
So sorry, it was just to clarify again. I understand overall that Somerset County Council are the lead authority. The government have recognised the sort of unitarisation, which who knew that was a word. And Ian, it sounds like obviously local economic development folk are involved, but are you saying that you've got a kind of project team that are producing a delivery plan? Is that going to come back out again for consultation, or are you using your consultant to kind of feed and inform that plan? Like how is that actually being shaped to get in? It was interesting to mention that the government has suggested or is happy with a mixed commissioning model or a mixed delivery model. And I think that was just the point we wanted to make, that in recognising small scale community groups and organisations, whether it's, I don't know, the Priorswood Community Centre in a pretty hard to reach neighbourhood, through to an emerging social enterprise doing something fantastic with mental health and community gardening at the back end of Wincanton. For those groups to gain access to this and to feel that this is a Somerset-wide investment, it's just that process really. And whether we could just have a conversation about, because this meeting, I got an invite. I didn't see it, as it were. I got invited because we all get onto people's lists, don't we? It's brilliant to be involved at a relatively early stage to get sight of what you're trying to achieve. And I recognise it's short term, but it's just having that conversation on how can we try to reach the smaller level groups and help them shape how delivery will happen, because there's so many ways. And maybe with the CRF, it felt to me it was kind of one way, which was put in a bid into the county council, and some people collaborated and some people didn't tell other people what was happening, and maybe we ended up with a bit of duplication and so on. Whereas if there's a way of, I don't know, the Community Foundation holding some funding that small groups could then access, it just gives people a slightly clearer view of, and small scale happens, as opposed to larger organisation with capacity to kind of mobilise bids rapidly getting. Sorry if that's a bit of a long-winded sentence, but I hope there was some sense
so in terms of what we've been engaged to do is to produce the kind of high-level investment plan. So I think the project plan, the delivery plan, comes as an attachment to that, but that will kind of be a work in progress. So I think that first stage is to submit the investment plan by the 1st of August, and obviously because it needs to be approved, etc. We've basically got sort of a month, six weeks to write it before it needs to be submitted to government. So that actual delivery plan will continue to be worked on, and it is being led, as you said, by the county council. They've been tasked with doing that as the as the continuing authority, but working with everyone to do that. So that hopefully will be a process then of trying to engage all of those small organisations and understanding how they can get into the funding and use it. In terms of the mechanism you mentioned about could somebody like the Somerset Community Foundation or somebody or other organisations be used to hold funds and distribute it? I think that is one of the mechanisms that the government is sort of suggesting is possible. So anything like that is possible. So it's kind of for Somerset to decide, Somerset in a generic sense, to decide how to do that, and then say this is how we're going to make sure the funding gets out into the community and delivers the aims of the Shared Prosperity Fund. Just picking up on the point that Justin made earlier on, it isn't actually that much money over a 3-year period, so you have to be pretty clever in trying to use it to get maximum outputs and outcomes. So.
Sorry, and could I just jump in, because on this point,
yeah, you've got your hand up anyway, so you can jump in.
Well, yeah, but I'm rudely jumping in ahead of. I can see Dave's got his hand up, and I don't like to jump in front of Dave Crisfield, but I will. I think it's worth exploring. And on the one hand, if you haven't got a lot of money, you have a great responsibility to use it as well as possible. And you know, one of the ways you can do that is think about how you invest in those small organisations and feed, and where the priorities are around transforming some of those most disadvantaged and left behind and giving people agency, I think is in there. So, you know, we tick that box. But what we can't do, or what we shouldn't do as responsible funders, is then place the burden of bureaucracy that comes with these sorts of funds on those very small, inexperienced groups. And also in those communities is where we find, I think, huge amount of appetite and desire and ideas and creativity to do stuff, but the actual sort of things that you might be able to fund in terms of recognised constituted groups are thinner on the ground the more impoverished the community is. So we need to think through all of those things and what's the right thing to do. But I am very, very wary that it would be irresponsible to offer up small amounts of funding and then load a huge amount of bureaucracy that comes with these funds. We can't do anything about it onto those groups as well. It's not fair, it's not realistic. But that's not to say the door's closed here or anywhere else. We should explore it and see how we can make it work.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. There is a lot of bureaucracy sat behind this. We haven't presented it today, but you know, there's a whole logic model about outputs, etc., which we have to meet. So we absolutely don't want to pass that on to groups who are trying to get some funding to do something locally. It's something to bear in mind and not make sure it doesn't happen. Who was next?
Yeah, it was David Crisfield.
We'll let Dave have a go now then. Excellent.
Thank you very much. I don't think we've used the term yet, but sort of really picking up on quite a number of the themes, talk about young people, you know, areas of deprivation, employability. You know, when we did the Future for Local Government in Somerset work 2 or 3 years ago, yeah, one of the sort of most concerning bits of data that threw up was the whole issue of social mobility, and that we have alarmingly poor levels of social mobility in Somerset. So I think there is potentially quite a significant piece of work that can be done around that issue. I mean, we're trying to do something just ourselves at South Somerset, you know, at the moment, but yeah, and and that's only going to get worse, I think, quite frankly, with all the issues that we're currently facing at the moment. So maybe that is a useful sort of theme in which to pull maybe a number of strands together. Yeah, because the evidence is pretty compelling in terms of, you know, so if you're talking about levelling up, we seriously need to do something about the poor levels of social mobility we have. So that just one observation. So I was a few minutes late as well. So the slides you were showing, which were E1 to 16, they're the themes, aren't they?
What are they? They're the intervention themes, so they're kind of themes that the government would measure us against in the community theme. But there's actually 35. So they run through into the business, into the supporting local business and the skills themes as well. And as already been mentioned, a lot of them are they're crossing anyway. Then you know, so there's a fair amount of scope to kind of figure out what we want to do.
And the other side of that coin, I think the comment I was going to make is that anybody looking at those think, wow, this is a manifesto for getting, you know, the world and his mother changed. And you know, and I think somehow, the whole issue of, managing expectations and the reality maybe of what we're going to be able to do here needs to be very, very clear. Because people will look at someone and say, oh yeah, we could get funding to do this and this. Well, it's just not going to happen.
One of the things that we've there's a questionnaire which hopefully will go out in the next couple of days, which asks people about the various themes and asks them to kind of try and identify their priorities within the theme as well. So try and whittle it down a little bit and try and give some clarity about what areas are absolute priority to tackle. And actually, you in this group today have already, you've already started to do that. So there's some really clear themes coming out, which would not necessarily narrow things down, but give a clarity about what should be tackled in the community area, I think, already. But yeah, this is an observation.
And I will just say as well, you'll very much want to join the people and skills session as well, because the social mobility piece is kind of front and centre in that theme. So there'll be a lot to discuss around that then as well. So
yeah, so feel free to join us 3 times over the next couple of days and discuss in those areas as well. Who's so
Joe Walsh next.
Okay, thanks.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just wanted to build on a couple of the points that's been raised previously. One aligned with what David's just said around the social mobility aspect. And Ian, I think we've highlighted to you the report that University have recently produced around addressing social mobility through the sort of education system. And I think there's opportunities there to link students into the communities, which sits quite separate to the skills theme within the Shared Prosperity Fund. So I think, like Dave said, we've got a few what we're branding as sort of pilots, demonstrator projects happening over the next few months, which if successful, we'd love to see continued in the future. And we'll drop you some information on that as well. And then the second point I was just going to make, and I know it's been made previously by others, is around the amounts of funding available. It's not a lot at all, but if we can use that initial funding to try and leverage as much as possible from other organisations, building on the good work that's already happening, whether that's larger organisations or the smaller community groups, they can access funds that we as sort of district councils and county councils can't. So just making the most of what we get to try and draw in even more funding to the district, which will hopefully lead to even more delivery as well, which is what we all want essentially.
Thanks, Joe. So picking up on that point, obviously we are also trying to collect. One of the questions is really areas where you've had success, and we're also collecting together any evidence in the evidence base, any studies that you've already got or any strategies that you've already got. So we're actively doing that. So if you do have those and you think we might not have them, if you could send us the links to them and we'll add them to the evidence base and add those to the objectives, that would be really helpful to help make the plan more robust. And anything where you've had success, which might be able to help feed into the plan over 3 years, that would be really helpful as well. Who's next?
Well, yeah, and I would just say I very much agree with you on the on that report by University. It makes some great recommendations as to types of models and interventions that can be developed or funded through the theme. So yeah, I just agree with you there very much. Jane Birch next.
Hi, I was just wondering whether climate and carbon reduction is one of the kind of cross-cutting themes for this. It doesn't seem, I haven't seen that mentioned.
I managed not to mention that, but the answer to that is absolutely yes. We didn't put that in the slides, but that's cross-cutting theme. There's a couple actually across levelling up and all of these agendas. So that is definitely one of them.
Okay, brilliant.
Yes. So as for on the emerging objectives that we had up, we had managing coastal change. So those protecting those natural and cultural assets which contribute to civic pride in those areas. Increasing and connecting green infrastructure, support targeted nature recovery, and then those two within this kind of theme. And then within the people and skills theme, there's a lot around upskilling businesses in green skills and kind of how they can take business action to respond to the climate emergency, etc.
Okay, that's good. I was wondering about that side of things, about local businesses and community organisations, about adaptations to reduce both their carbon emissions and their costs as well as a business in terms of energy bills and that kind of thing, but also for households as well, whether, because obviously, we all know it's getting very expensive to heat our homes and fuel our cars and all that kind of thing, and whether we can do something around that can be, something to think about in terms of all these things, really, to make sure, because it's about making those businesses and organisations and households work, really, isn't it? So they can afford to do what they need to do. So,
I mean, that fuel poverty, all of those kind of household issues there, they are obviously there in one of those E numbers that I whipped over quickly, but clearly a much, a massive issue over the next couple of years. So yeah, that can be there, and that can be a focus of the plan.
Good, thank you.
We've got somebody else.
Yes, Lisa.
Morning, everyone. Is it still morning? Yeah, it's still morning. Hi, Ian. Oh, look at that. Perfect timing. My phone goes off. Bear with me right now. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Tuck. I'm from Somerset West and Taunton Council. Ian, one of the things that I noticed on the list of criteria or things that the government are looking to invest in, and cross-cutting with sort of already in place strategic objectives across the county, town centres clearly feature strongly within all of the language. And so I suppose this is a question from me back out to the room, but town centres, as an investment, potential area of investment, is looking at how we can protect our town centres to be hubs for community networks, community support, local business, local economy, jobs. How can we ensure that we maintain our town centres to provide all of those facilities for our local population? So how we do that is always going to be an interesting question. And there are lots of things I guess we could do as an area of investment, but I was just wondering whether anyone else around the room thinks that doing something to make those town centres community and economic hubs again is a theme that we should be looking at in the investment plan. And obviously lob into the rural issues in Somerset as well. So it's kind of the opposite side of the coin. So it's an interesting question, isn't it? Does anyone? Yeah, we haven't got any council.
Yeah, from Julie Reader Sullivan.
Okay, there you go, Julie.
Yes, totally agree, Lisa. We also need to do the town centres, even though I made my plea for rural.
Yeah.
It's really important that we don't lose that. Whatever the future looks for town centres visioning, whether it is that, I know we all go through this, the mix of resi and business in order to keep a dynamic town centre moving forwards, etc., etc. So yeah, just to support that.
Let's see. Okay. Right. We've got any other hands waiting?
No other hands.
Okay.
Should we bring up those questions from the slides again and see if there are any that we can touch on again?
Get my share. See something in the chat there. A few more minutes now. I think we've run through. Can you see that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've run through particular areas where you feel are fundamental support. So that was the first question. Areas where you've experienced success. We've had a bit of a chat about some of those things, and as I've said, if you've got anything specific you think that would really help, that would be good. And then I suppose the final question was: are there any areas you feel where there's a limited need for support? It's a tricky one, this. So there are less relevance, I suppose, less relevance to Somerset, I suppose, is the context of this question. Anyone got any thoughts on that they want to share?
It doesn't look like
Nobody dares say Taunton's not important. No.
Okay. Yeah. So nothing
That was
there.
a joke. That was a joke.
Or you'll be taken outside in a minute. So yeah, okay. So those are the questions. I suppose there's just a couple of feedback opportunities. You did mention this, Charlotte, earlier on. So I just wanted to make you aware. Obviously, you can send anything into the UK SPF website, which is being managed by Anne-Marie at County Council. And there's going to be a questionnaire link on there shortly, just finalising that. And as I've already mentioned, that's seeking your input and anyone's input really on what the key priorities might be in the themes. So, and I think that's going to have a ranking score in it, isn't it? So, Elliot, have you worked that into it yet? Elliot's
Yes.
technical whiz, so he's working on that. So, so that should give some opportunity to kind of identify those areas and sort of capture a bit more information. As we mentioned, we've got another workshop later on community in place. So that's another opportunity to have a go through this theme again. And then tomorrow we've got 2 scheduled workshops which are welcome to join on supporting local business and skills. We will have captured all the comments in the chat that you've already put up as well, and obviously the recording. So we'll review back again and make a summary of what's been said today. So just to give you a flavour in the last few minutes of the next steps. So as I mentioned already, we're going to collate all these theme discussions. We're continuing to review the existing strategies and evidence bases. So anything else, please do send it to us. Anything you've got into that email address, and that'll be cascaded to us so that we can put that together. And so the next step then is to try and align all of your priorities, review that evidence base and define key themes for Somerset, and then draft the investment plan. So simple. So yeah, so that's the kind of task over the coming weeks, really, those tasks over the coming weeks. Is there anyone else waiting to talk? Anyone wanted to say anything else? We've got 5 minutes left. You might go to rob 5 minutes back of your day. No? Not presenting now, so I can see people again. Okay. So nobody else in the chat?
Nobody else in the no one else with their hands up.
Okay.
I'm just going through now, double check there's no final questions that haven't been responded to. No, I don't think so.
Okay, so if there's nothing else at the minute, we'll aim to keep in touch, sort of feedback at some point, and we may see some of you this afternoon or tomorrow. Thanks for your participation and for feeding into this workshop. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye, Jane.